I think now Eric is here. So although he might have some network issue, we will start introducing him into the topic and about immune impact as a whole. So to begin with, welcome everybody to Global Week of Action SUG 13 event, as Zoe said, and I'm your one of the admin along with Zoe. Hello everybody. And so Immune Impact is a global youth NGO that advances Model UN and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is SDG, through virtual programs and events. Today, as part of our Global Week of Action event, we are delighted to introduce Eric Damien, and on the topic of getting to the roots of the climate crises. Eric Damien is 19-year-old climate activist from Nairobi. As a climate activist, he suggests many hats in different organizations like Climate Cardinals, where he worked in the international relations team, and at Fridays for Future, where he is weekly striker. He is also a member of UNEP, MGCY, and Youngo, the UNFCCC Youth Constituency. And about the session, the topic is getting to the roots of the climate crises, and the talk will be take a deep dive into the system of oppression like environmental racism and other things. So please welcome Eric, our guest speaker, to our session. So the floor is yours, Eric.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I apologize. First of all, I'd like to apologize for the technical difficulties we heard at the beginning of the call. I was trying to log in and all, and then stuff happened. So I had prepared a slide, but unfortunately, that is also a part of the what happened, and I'm trying to bring that up once my computer is working. I will perhaps be able to share it with you. But in the meantime, yeah, as Alexander said, I am Eric. I work with Fridays for Future. I think most of you know Fridays for Future from Greta Thunberg. The movement started in Sweden, where the youth, or rather students, climate activists, skip school to protest in front of like parliaments or like government buildings to demand for urgent climate action. I think that's probably something we're known for among the other organizations I work for that Alexander has mentioned. I am going to introduce today's topic, which is getting to the roots of the climate crisis. This session is going to look at ways in which different communities and people across the globe have been disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. So we're going to take a deep dive. Well, not that deep, but we're going to look at how the climate crisis affects people of different races differently, peoples of different genders, and what we can do in order to achieve climate justice. At any point of this, when you cannot hear me, please let me know so that I repeat, or if you have a question, you can be sure to put a stack in the chat, or like just let me know that you didn't hear or get a point. And I will also be sharing links to different news articles and for further reference. So yeah, that is that. I have been trying to, just a second.
Eric, if you want, we can share your slides for you if you email them to us, if that's easier.
Yeah, one sec. I will be trying to do that in a sec. As I have been speaking, I've been trying to like try and fix my computer and all. Yeah, but that it should be working in a few.
No worries. We're really glad to have you here, nonetheless.
Yeah. absolutely. So yeah, perhaps in the middle of all this, I can try and just go ahead and perhaps start talking about getting to the roots of the climate crisis. And as Alexander mentioned, one of the things we'll be talking about today is colonialism. Colonialism, capitalism, patriarchy. As we look at patriarchy, you'll be able to see why different communities, especially in the most affected areas, the most affected people and areas, MAPA, why women are mostly affected by the climate crisis compared to men, which is unfortunate, I guess. We're going to look at the UN Women reports, which basically has more details on that. On patriarchy, we're going to look that's patriarchy. Capitalism. We're going to see how capitalism has different businesses to exploit exploit different lands like forests, which act as carbon sinks. I know most of you have seen what's happening in the Amazon, and yeah. So, okay, I think I'll just share the slides with you guys because I seem not to be able to bring that. Yeah, I think I've sent the slides, so perhaps you guys could be able to share. Screen share.
Alex, do you get the slides?
Not yet, but I will share you as soon as I get it.
Okay, awesome.
It's on the chat.
Oh, okay. I don't see anything on the chat, but let me see.
I got it. I will share you.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Here we go. Okay, Eric, the floor is yours.
Yay, finally. Could you move the slides to the first topic on it? Could you just move the slides? Yeah, exactly. The previous one. Yeah. Nah, not that one. Hello. Yeah, that one, exactly. So as I was saying, we're going to look at the different systems of oppression that have been leading to different communities and most affected people, and the most affected people in areas, which is just MAPA, get to be like disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. So what are the systems of oppression? These are like institutionalized powers that have been historically formed and perpetuated. So some of them, some of them are colonialism, patriarchy. Yeah, for some reason, I think I hear like double. Wait, do you hear double right now?
I think
Like
because you've joined twice. So do you mind if I move one of you to the waiting room?
wait, do you still hear twice?
No, I think you're good now.
Yeah, I think it's
Oh,
solved.
okay, cool. Oh my God, this is so messy. So some of the system of oppression, as I was saying, are institutionalized powers that have been historically formed and perpetuated. One of them is colonialism, patriarchy, racism, and capitalism. I think we can move to the next slide. Yeah, so colonialism. Next slide. Yeah, colonialism can be thought of as control of a piece of land and people by a more dominated power. The policy of acquiring full or partial political control of another country, occupying it with settlers and exploiting it economically. So when colonialism happened, and of course, like if you're in the global north, I'm sure maybe you might not realize that there is neocolonialism where indigenous lands are not being respected, and like neocolonialism is being perpetuated based on ideologies that were instilled by the colonizers in these areas, like the most affected people and areas, where is Mapa. So neocolonialism basically, in some instances, is on indigenous lands. So indigenous people protect almost 80% of the world's biodiversity, yet they're 5%. And in most cases, indigenous lands are comprised of forests, which act as carbon sinks. Basically, carbon sinks just absorb the like carbon dioxide, and which act as good ways to sort of like absorb carbon, which would otherwise be harmful for in the climate crisis. And in this case, so where colonialism comes in is that when colonizers came in, they did not respect the people and the land. And in this case, it happened that they thought better based on their Western education that they should exploit the lands. And in a case where indigenous lands know better about their lands. And this is why we see indigenous people being chased out of their lands, because people do not respect their knowledge of taking care of the lands. And this has happened in many places, in the Amazon, in Kenya, where indigenous people were kicked out of the Mao forest, which basically is a good water resource that supplies water to different parts of the country, in different parts of West Africa. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. So this is just basically some data on fossil fuel use and cement production. You will find that most of this happens in it exploits biodiversity to be able to extract this minerals and all that. So this is just the concept of extractivism. And tons of CO2 per person in a year. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. Okay, we can move to the next slide. We can just skip that one. Yeah, so that we go quick. Yeah, racism. So on the concept of racism, there's what is called environmental racism. Environmental racism has happened in many parts of the world, like here in Kenya, where companies like Shell have this lobby group where they export petrochemicals to Africa. So which is inherently like Black communities in the name of free trade and all that. So most of US petrochemicals, unfortunately, are dumped in different countries. Well, in the United States, they definitely market them as going to recycle them. But basically, if you look at the technology that different countries have in Kenya to contain the petrochemicals, which are sometimes changed into plastic or whatnot, they end up not just being like put in dump sites and filling landfills in Africa. And that is one issue. In different areas, like in California, you'll find out that California, especially in inherently Black communities, the oil is being mined literally where they live. Like you can move from somebody's house and just go like a few meters, and you find like an oil rig or something like that. And this is against like of course, mining oil uses a lot of like pollutes a lot of environment, the air and all that. So you'll find that many of these communities have respiratory problems because of this. And and of course the GHG emissions, the carbon emissions from the oil affects the climate and all that. But the mining itself and the choice of areas is one of these problems, because they haven't allocated resources to support the communities living there. And most of these fossil fuel companies where they mine ends up not having like the support of the communities which own the land. And that is of course what is happening in Uganda, in Lamu here in Kenya, among other places, in Nigeria, where the Ogoni community are being affected by the mining activities from this a company called Shell. I don't know if you have it in your countries, but yeah, that is it. We can move to the next slide. Yeah, so this basically explains I don't know if you can be able to play the video, but this video basically explains environmental racism. Maybe you can play it. We can't hear.
Sorry, I just need to share my sound. 1 second.
Is the new Jim Crow. Yeah, I get it. The environment isn't a person. How can it be racist? But the most basic pieces of the environment, the air we breathe and the water we drink, are controlled and designed by people. And people can be racist. More than half of all people who live close to hazardous waste are people of color. Floodplains nationwide have high populations of Blacks and Hispanics. Black children are twice as likely to suffer from lead poisoning as white children. This inequality is no accident. Pollution and the risk of disaster are assigned to Black and brown communities through generations of discrimination and political neglect. Enslaved Africans were commodities partly because their work carried environmental risks that were unacceptable to whites, like exposure to heat, malaria, and mosquitoes. As Jim Crow laws created racial segregation, they also reinforced an environmental system that still disadvantages minorities. It's no wonder that Black and Hispanic children have the highest rates of asthma, or that hurricanes like Katrina, Sandy, and Matthew did their worst damage in communities of color. Rich white neighborhoods can update their water pipes, but not places like Flint. The Jim Crow laws are dead and gone, but the fact that people of color are still more likely to die from environmental causes is no accident.
Oh, yeah, great. I hope that was informative. I don't know if you like the video. You can, of course, find it on YouTube if you want to watch it again, or share it with your friends, family, and whoever you'd like to share it with. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, this basically happens mostly in the United States, where prisoners are forced to clean up toxic areas like the BP oil spill. If you have noticed that climate activists are definitely against fossil fuel industry for obvious reasons, they're the impacts the impacts, the activities of the fossil fuel industries are having taking a great toll on the environment and the climate because of the GH emissions. But of course, on the environment, there are things like the oil spills and the direct pollution that comes with the mining. So that directly affects communities living in the areas where they mine. So basically, this mostly happens in global North countries, although this also happens in some of the global South countries, where prisoners are used to clean oil spills, to stop wildfires and all that. And in a natural disaster like prison protocols, like they end up locking up prisoners. This has happened like in different hurricanes, like Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, where during Hurricane Katrina, prisoners were left inside the prison while the hurricane hit, and they ended up being affected. I don't know. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Capitalism. Now, yeah, this is a very interesting one. We can go to the next slide. What explains capitalism? Yeah, so capitalism, as defined by the Merriam-Webster, is an economic system characterized by private or corporate ownership of capital goods, by investments that are determined by private decision, and by prices, production, and the distribution of goods that are determined mainly by competition and a free capitalism and a free market. So let's look at the capitalism's impact on the climate. So capitalism can lead to unchecked resource depletion for the profit of fewer over the many, which does not take into account the destruction of the natural world and human life. So there are many ways that this one is the most extensive topic, how capitalism affects the climate. As I mentioned, stuff to do with the carbon sinks, where forests act as carbon sinks. So they basically just absorb like the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Well, not all of it, but a good amount of it. And you have seen in, say, the Amazon, where forests are being burnt up to provide land to create industries like animal agriculture and all that. So, and that is one of the one of the good examples of how capitalism affects the climate. You can see in many ways they deplete environmental resources, forests, or even rivers, where they redirect most of the water to just one industry or they definitely just like pollute the waters, like the effluents are unchecked and they end up polluting water and all that. So those are like good examples of how capitalism ends up destroying the climate. And we can go to the next slide. Patriarchy. Yeah, patriarchy. We can go to the next slide where it just explains patriarchy. Yeah. Okay, so that's the definition of patriarchy. I know many of you know what patriarchy is, but just for maybe for those who don't, or maybe who would want to put things into perspective, patriarchy is a social organization marked by the supremacy of the father in the clan, or the legal independence of wives and children, and the reckoning of descent and inheritance in the male line. A society, or the second definition, is a society organized according to the principles of practices of patriarchy. So patriarchy in different ways leads, of course, when the effects of the climate crisis hit, say hurricane or floods, it leads to women being affected by the climate crisis disproportionately compared to, say, say to other genders. This is because in a society when when a society where they uphold the institution of patriarchy, when their husbands die, or because of like the impacts of the climate crisis, like say they end up being affected by a hurricane, a flood, and their husbands died, the women are left with nothing because most of the property is owned by the man, and he has died and destroyed, and women do not have a place in the society, where they end up not even having economic opportunities like men, and economic opportunities like the men, so they're not able to like advance themselves economically, like start a business. And in most of the societies, of course, like there's no like women empowerment because of patriarchy, so they do not have the education necessary to support themselves when a climate catastrophe hit. And that is what we say in most communities in Africa, where the communities, the traditional communities, patriarchal. Well, not all of them, but there are many of which are, and that's so in that situation when climate catastrophes hit, women end up being more affected by the climate crisis. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Yeah. So this is more about like the UN report I was talking about. So women are more affected by the climate crisis than men. Figures from the UN Gateway on Gender Equality and Empowerment of Women indicate that 80% of people displaced by climate change are women. Note the numbers there. 80% of people affected by the climate crisis are women. Women are more likely than men to experience poverty and have less socio-economic power, according to UN Women. This makes it difficult to recover from disasters, which affect infrastructure, jobs, and housing. So this just basically puts to the numbers what I was telling you about, where women do not have like, they're not economically empowered, or they do not own the property. So when their husbands die or something like that because of a climate catastrophe, they end up being affected because they cannot move on, you know? Yeah, so just puts the numbers to the story I was telling you about. We can move on to the next slide. Oh yeah, now we're at industrial animal agriculture. This is just before I go into explaining that, I'm sure many of you like, I don't know if Zoe explains to you when at the start, I heard Zoe explaining more about the actions you can take for climate crisis, to like the different actions you can take, like charging your phone and all that. So I'm not sure if Zoe mentioned maybe changing your diet, like going vegan or something, but these are some of the actions that you can take. Well, I wouldn't, it depends on where you come from, because like there are some communities like here in Kenya that are brought up on like animals, which so it's really hard for them to change, but it also depends with your with where you come from, if you're able to afford the change and all that. So I cannot really say, I'm not asking anyone to do that, but if you want to, that will be a good step to tackle, so that to just take to prevent the impacts of the climate crisis. And of course, there's all that, but I'm sure you're wondering why go vegan, or why not take meat, all that. Now, this is the story and the numbers behind it. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, livestock, including cows, pigs, sheep, and other animals, are responsible for about 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So well, this is what happens basically is that some of these animals emit methane, which is twice more harmful than carbon dioxide. So that is why that is twice more harmful to the climate crisis compared to the to carbon dioxide. So increased, and then there's also the aspect of increased demand for grazing land causes deforestation, which leads to habitat loss and rapid release of CO2. So apart from animals emitting like methane, there's also the part where for industrial agriculture industries, as I explained on capitalism, for profit, and they're looking like for more land to graze their cows, to graze their all those animals that probably people eat. They end up cutting down trees to find these vast grazing lands, like what I was mentioning in the Amazon. And this also, like, of course, as I said, forests acts as carbon sinks. So if the trees are cut, the carbon is released into the air and has more impacts on the climate. So those are the two reasons why people advise you to go vegan. And that is this basically the perspective and the numbers to that. It also depends, because note that I also mentioned it's industrial animal agriculture. There are some people or some communities, especially indigenous communities, which have like raised their cattle well. So it's not necessarily like industrial ways. So they don't like cut trees and all that to raise their animals and all that, and that's that definitely like makes a difference. This definitely depends on where you source your meat from. So that could be maybe something you look at when buying your meat, or just going vegan altogether. Yeah. And next slide. Okay, so on the aspect, as I was mentioning, we were looking at systemic oppression and how different people are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. In the next slide, in this slide now, we're talking about how climate change affects disabled people. So when we get to air pollution and the air quality, it increases the sensitivity to changes for disabled people, depending on the disability. So like increased sensitivity to changes in air quality and temperature due to climate change fueled natural disasters, heightens risk for disabled people and chronically ill people. And there's also disabled people have a high chance of being in poverty due to fewer work options and the inability or low ability to work long hours in uncomfortable settings. This exacerbates other environmental stresses. So as I mentioned, of course, in different parts of the globe, depending on where you come from, there is a lot of air pollution from fossil fuel industries, from fossil fuel companies, and of course other stresses from the climate crisis, say increased temperatures or mention it, all of those, and they end up disproportionately affecting disabled people, as I mentioned. We can go to the next slide. So this one basically explains how climate change affects disabled people. And disabled people, including elderly people, have a high risk of being neglected and left behind due to when an emergency requires immediate migration. Yeah. And now these are the structural changes needed. So other than this that are written on this slide, I am going to first start with my own, like the ones that are in my mind. I was planning to share with you this before I go into these ones. So when we talked about colonialism, I think one of the best ways to stop the impacts of colonialism on different communities when especially in the aspect of climate change, is respecting indigenous knowledge and indigenous lands, and mostly the local people living there. So that is a good way to take a step. That is mostly reading. You can try and decolonize yourself, your knowledge, because most of the things people are taught or from the Western education system are they are, you know, like there is a saying that says when the story is written by the hunter, you'll never know the perspective of the lion. Like the story will be biased to the hunter, so you will never know the perspective of the lion unless the lion actually tells its story. So, and that is the same thing when Western education is teaching you about different parts of the globe and how they're impacted. And that is why I would advise, if you want to decolonize yourself, learn about how climate change is affecting different people, you'd want to read from the people who live there so that you get your own perspectives and you're able to respect their experiences with their land, with their environment, and how they can be able to manage and maintain them as they have been doing for time immemorial. That is one. Two is about patriarchy. Patriarchy is not normal by itself. It's not a normal thing, because so one of the things that you'd want to do is I don't know, is it like Patriot guys? I don't know. My English is not good, but just like saying like undoing patriarchy by itself, so that this comes on the issues of like women empowerment, and that is one of the ways of tackling the climate crisis, in the sense that when give women and giving equal opportunities as the men, there it reduces the chances of them being disproportionately affected by the climate crisis when the climate catastrophes hit. That in that case will be able to help them support themselves and all that. And then when it comes to capitalism, capitalism by itself is controversial because capitalism is politicized in different countries. So if you're anti-capitalist, people say that you are from the left, but there are some things that really should not be politicized, especially human rights. And capitalism basically infringes people's human rights, especially the right to clean air, the right to clean environments, because capitalism basically, like what I explained in the industries, because industries just want profit, they end up exploiting the people's lands and natural resources in the name of profit. And that is why we need to probably decapitalize this. And if you wanna start small, is maybe look for ethical brands that are not any way related to the Amazon. They do not affect what is happening. That is at a small level, but at a global level, you perhaps need to join a movement to protest and demand for change. One of the movements is Fridays for Future. I think I'm going to talk about that later when I finish this. And yeah, so those are just a few examples of structural changes needed, being anti-capitalist, to protect people's human rights, rights to clean air, rights to clean environment, and all that. And then there are these ones written here, which is local schools to implement climate justice education. I don't know if you guys are taught about climate change in schools extensively. I don't know what is the situation in your countries. Perhaps maybe one of you guys will tell me that when I finish this. And then there's also local and community farming. This is the best way to source your food compared to buying them from companies that are tearing down lands and forests to plant foods. So also look for ethical brands while you're buying your food and all that. So you make sure you're contributing positively to the environment, but from what you're buying. Sustainable autonomous housing, and lastly, urge local elected officials to create affordable mass transit systems. Of course, these mass transit systems, I don't know what you guys use. Of course, this happens differently in different countries. There is trains, or like in New York, I hear there's a subway system. That's very cool. I want to try that when I go there, but I've never been there. But yeah, I think they should be affordable and powered on renewable energy so that we are able to phase out the use of fossil fuels in different lands. And my last thing is about how to get involved to make a difference. Other than what Zoe shared with you guys at the beginning of the call, there are other ways you can take action, which is the asking your elected officials to make a climate pledge. And that is basically also like asking your parents to vote for good climate leaders who have great policies on like have good climate policies that you can endorse. One of the good policies, if you're from the United States, is the Green New Deal. You can also join a movement, climate movement, to demand action. And that is possible through, of course, from recently, I think you have been hearing about the youth climate movement and different youth climate-led organizations springing up to demand change from their governments. And one good movement like that is Fridays for Future, which is open to everyone. So despite the age I joined Fridays for Future, and I was just 17 years old. And another good movement is Zero Hour. If you're in the United States, I joined Zero Hour as a communications team assistant in 2019 or something. Yeah, where we just advocate digitally for action to be taken. There also are other movements like Sunrise movements. You can just look them up depending on the area you come from. Or yeah, that is it. So joining a movement, you know, like some of this systemic injustices, systemic ways of institutionalized systemic ways of oppression like capitalism are very big for us to handle at times. And that is why you want to join a movement to demand your leaders to change, or to demand action for the climate crisis. And that is one of the ways, because when you join a movement together, you can achieve more than when you're an individual. And I think that's pretty much it. We have 6 minutes left, so maybe I can open the floor to questions.
Perfect. So feel free to type a question in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I will call on you to unmute yourself. So does anyone have any questions? Oh yeah, Obasi, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to use this opportunity to appreciate the resource person who have just concluded and have done justice to some of the teaching. Okay, my name is Obasi John. So I'm an SDG advocate. Hello, please, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I said my name is Obasi John. I'm currently in Nigeria. So I'm a passionate SDG advocate. I'm passionate about SDG Goal 4, quality education, Goal 6, clean water and sanitation, and then Goal 13, climate action, with Goal 17. So my question to the lecturer is, how do we engage stakeholders in order to fight this climate action group? Because we see in a case where our environment, like in the course of your study, I found out there is a place you mentioned in Nigeria, Ogoni land. They are having issue with this climate change. And then since then, they've been trying to find out solution. So, but it's like on the part of the government that they don't want to, come out fully and settle the issue. So my question to you is that, how do we engage stakeholders in order to fight and bring solution to this climate change? Number two, you see, we see where, for instance, if we want to go to an environment to create environmental awareness, or let's say carry out a cleanup exercise, the people in the community will be demanding for, let's say, money or for fund. You see, the people that are coming to create solution and you are demanding for money. So please, how do we handle that situation? Because it's like a very big issue over here where passionate SDG advocate or environmentalists want to create change either in our local community, and then we see the people of the community are demanding, okay, what are we going to gain? You are the one that is coming to make a change. How do we handle that? So finally, how do we take this teaching to the local community? Because I see that there are so many of our local community members that don't have access to internet. They don't have access to Zoom. So the teaching will be effective if we take this teaching to the grassroots level, to the local community. So please, how do we take this teaching, not just studying knowledge, to our local community? And how do we get, at times one of the challenge we're having is getting organization that will sponsor the movement. We have the passion is there, the zeal is there. And then we see that one of the challenges we have is getting sponsors that will help us to be able to ginger us and then make sure we fight this cause and fight it once and for all. Please, how can we get sponsors, organization that will be able to help us to push this passion ahead? Thank you so much for giving me opportunity to express my thought.
Okay, thank you. Those are three very good questions. Wait, what? What is happening? Okay, so I think, why is there that noise? I don't know what's happening. So
I think someone was unmuted, but everyone please stay on mute unless you're called on. Thank you.
okay, so I would like to say that that's a pretty normal community when they demand for money or something like that. Of course, those challenges that you have mentioned are the same challenges that I also encounter in my community when advocating for SDG 13. Basically, the best way to be able to get the community involved is to educate them. That is the first step. So as you mentioned, there is no internet. They do not have access to internet. And I think that is, well, at Climate Cardinals, I know that is something that Sophia, the executive director, is really concerned about. And she's working really hard to make books accessible to countries in the global south, especially when you find like these books are just in different languages that are not understandable. Most of them are just in English, yet communities speak in different languages. So I think, but of course, before that happens, I think Based on your knowledge, I think the best way and to the starting point, the base point is just to educate them based on what you know about SDG 13. I'm not sure if you've been attending this MUN Impact program, but I'm sure they shared very important and key details that you can share with your community. That way, that will solve the problem of like when you want to engage them in the community and to do like an environmental action and they ask for money, they'll see that this is something that is affecting them. So if they don't clean up the health impacts of the environment, that environment, or whatever is the problem is with the environment, I think they're going. So just educating them will help them own up to their own environment, to their own climate, and that way they may be able to take action voluntarily. So that is the part of educating them. I think educating them will solve the problem of like the community issues. And then getting funds, I don't know how to answer that directly, but the best way to try and get funds maybe for climate related events, you might want to partner with a bigger organization. You can reach out to organizations like 350 or Greenpeace, depending on which one is local, so that they may be able to support these events. I think that is what I do here in Kenya when I want to organize like a climate protest, where I reach out to 350 Africa, who are very very supportive of our actions, especially because we are youth-led, and that way they just fund our actions and all that. So maybe that could help. I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering that question. I hope it answers your question, Obasi. And we'll take one final question just due to time constraints. But Abi Rav, actually, we'll take two more, I think, because
I wanted to ask that how patriarchy is related to climate change. Can we get more emphasis on it? Because as far as my perspective goes, it's more a social problem than an environmental one. The second one is that how the country is dependent upon their natural assets, such as the country of Brazil, Peru, how they will cope up with saving the environment without collapsing their economy. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't get the last, without collecting what? Sorry.
How will dependent economies of countries such as Brazil and Peru, whose economies are directly dependent upon their natural assets, will implement such climate protections without deteriorating their economy?
Okay, good. So I'll start with the first question on patriarchy. Basically, it is a social problem, as you said. I agree with that. Its link to the climate crisis is that it leads to. I was basically like talking about how it leads to different people being affected disproportionately by the climate crisis. As I mentioned, women, because women are more, the community, a patriarchal community like here in Africa mostly empowers men and gives them all the economic tools to be able to build themselves. They are educated and all that compared to women. So when climate catastrophes hit, the different areas, women are disproportionately affected in the sense that because the society is patriarchal, women were not educated or something like that, which is very common, is they are affected, women are affected because like they didn't have the economic empowerment, and that leads to them disproportionately affected. When their husbands die, they're left alone with the children and they're not able to build themselves. Yeah. And all that. I think those are some of good links. And then in response to your second questions on how countries like Brazil, which depend on their natural resources? Well, I think that that is a very good question. And responding to that is that we need to, our economic models need to coexist with nature. We have humanity has coexisted with nature for years sustainably, but now when it comes to capitalism, where there's more interest for profit, for more money, that is when now it's basically like corporate grid. Now they end up exploiting their resources more, and that way they endanger themselves more than they think. When they think, oh, we want more money, let's cut down the forest. So I think maybe my answer to that would just be like finding good economic models, sustainable models that enable us to coexist more with nature, and that could be by so that maybe would be by when we break corporate greed in that sense. So when we make corporate greed, we break corporate greed in that sense. So there's just being anti-capitalist in that sense, then we don't want more than enough. And that way we don't move into zones that are not needed. Of course, there are other ways to tap into the economy, and that is not only from natural resources, but through investment in other sectors that can provide better economic opportunities for the country. Yeah, I think that is good. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
Okay, so unfortunately, we're a little over time, so that'll be it for questions. But if you have more that come up, maybe you can contact Eric afterwards with your follow-up questions. But I really want to thank Eric so much for coming and presenting to us. We really appreciated it. And your perspective was really unique and informative. And I think it was just a really valuable and informative presentation. So thank you for taking time out of your day to come talk to us. And I hope that everyone else found this just as informative and valuable as I did. And we really look forward to seeing you back at our future events. Just a reminder that our next presentation is tomorrow at 1500 UTC. And the topic is climate justice in the Pajaro Valley of California. So a very specific regional look at the climate crisis. But thank you everyone so much for attending. I wish you a fantastic day. And thank you again, Eric, for joining us. Bye.
Cool.